Andy Rogers. It was the early hours of Sunday morning. Pitch black, freezing cold, and I was kneeling in the front of the lifeboat as we headed across to a yacht in distress. The gentleman on board, he'd been woken in the middle of the night to rough seas, and he'd gone up on deck and he'd found that his anchor was slipping and he was being dragged slowly towards the shore. We had been paged as lifeboat crew and we were on the way over to him. As we rounded in the bay, we could see the lights in the distance, so we dashed across as quickly as we dared in the darkness. When we got there, we could already see he was in serious trouble. He was already in breaking waves. Now, we needed to get a line to him as quickly as we could. We needed to gain some control. But getting a line to him in breaking surf, that was going to be a challenge. So John, who was the helm, he brought the lifeboat round into the surf and he got his head to sea, and we started slowly moving across to him. Now, the sea can be unpredictable at the best of times, but in breaking waves and in the dark, this was going to be a challenge. And it was really eerie as well, because all I could hear all around me was the thunder of the breaking surf and the rolling waves crashing on the shore, but we couldn't see what was coming at us. I was the first one to spot the wave coming up front. It rose up out of the darkness, and I shouted back to John, "Wave coming!" He didn't have enough time to straighten the boat out, and it hit us on the front quarter. As the boat lifted up in the air, I grabbed hold, but I could feel my body and my legs coming out of the boat. Now, it's funny to think how I found myself in that position in the first place. A couple of years before, my wife and myself, we'd moved to the Gower on the South Wales coast. We both holidayed there as children, and it was a bit of a dream come true. That weekend when we moved in, I was pottering in the garden, and one of the neighbours came across and introduced himself. Halfway through the conversation, he said to me, "What do you do on a Sunday morning?" Now, I should have known that this was a loaded question. "Why not come over to the lifeboat station, see what it's all about? Come and have a look, we could always do with new crew." Now, we'd moved down to the Gower to take things a little bit easier. My wife and myself, we'd worked in the city for many years. And obviously by city, I mean Cardiff. Cardiff is a city. And now it was being suggested that I might join the lifeboat. On call 24 hours a day, training every weekend, sometimes evenings, sometimes nights. Maybe putting myself in harm's way. My wife reminded me I'd never actually been in a boat and been to sea before. And I wasn't a big fan of swimming. Up to there on holidays was about it. But I did feel it appropriate to tell her that I did have my 50-metre swimming badge from school. That felt relevant at the time. So obviously this was just a stupid idea. This was crazy. It didn't fit in with why we'd moved to the Gower in the first place, and it was a non-starter. So quite clearly, Sunday morning came along, and there I was sitting in the boat, all kitted up, ready to go. Now, nothing I saw on that day, on that practice session, made me think this was going to be any easier. In fact, the opposite. I knew it was going to be a massive challenge. All of the items in the boat that I would need to learn. I remember the helm showing me how to do various knots, and I'd need to know sort of 15, 16 of these, and I'd need to be able to do them in the dark, and seeing the conditions and the coastline. But my gut was telling me this was something I needed to do. This was an opportunity that I needed to take, and so I joined. Now, we've all had pivotal moments in our lives, things we look back on in the past where we can pinpoint events, and these events have shaped us. They've sent us down a certain route. They've made us who we are. And I'm sure if I asked you all, you could point to some moments in your lives that have had that impact. And these moments, they often dictate how we see the world around us. They often dictate how we interact with the world around us. And for many people, things just happen to them. And they accept the way things are, and they carry on down a certain route as if a script has been written. But opportunities are presenting themselves to us all of the time. Opportunities that we can control, if we've got the courage to take the chance. Now, nothing about the lifeboat made sense, but my gut feeling was to do it. And we need to learn to trust our gut feelings, because they're not random feelings. Our minds are telling us, our minds are making millions of decisions in split seconds, and they're weighing everything up and they're saying, from the experiences and the ability that you have to date, you can do this. This is something you can achieve. And it's only when we start to question and second guess our ability to deal with those challenges that we talk ourselves out to things and we say, yeah, do you know what? What if this happens? Oh, what if that happens? And eventually we think, my head is telling me that's the sensible route to take. That's the safest option. I used to be a print sales rep, and I genuinely believed that sales was all about trust, building relationship, exceeding expectations, having the client's best interest at heart. But the printer I worked for, unfortunately, didn't have the same opinion. As far as they were concerned, it was about getting as much business as possible and shoving it in the door and overloading the presses, even if jobs were running late. It was about making as much money as we could, even if there was collateral damage on the way. And I went in to see my boss one day and I said, Malcolm, I'm really concerned. There's been a few instances and I just feel like I'm going to be losing my clients because of the way the company's treating them. And he shook his head and he just looked at me disappointedly and said, sit down, Andy. You've never run a business before, so I wouldn't expect you to understand. And at the age of 34, he decided to draw me a picture. And this is the picture he drew. And he said, look, let me explain. The ladder, that's the company. The people on the ladder, that's our clients. As long as the ladder's full, I'm happy. Your job is to stand at the bottom of the ladder and shove people on. And if people fall off the top of the ladder, that's okay. As long as the ladder's full and you're shoving, I'm happy. And I said, Malcolm, surely it's got to be easier to keep people on the ladder than it is to keep shoving new people on all the time. And we agreed to disagree. And I walked out of the office and I thought, that's not the way I want to deal with people. That's not the way that I want to run myself. And my gut was telling me, actually, this was an opportunity. This was the moment. This was the time. Before that, I'd never even considered running my own business. I didn't think I was that sort of person. Never entered my mind. That weekend, I talked to my wife, and we talked back and forth, pros and cons. And on the Sunday night, she said to me, do you know what? We're not going to come to a decision logically here, are we? What is your gut telling you? And I said, well, my gut is telling me to do it. So she said, then do it. And we'll sort everything else out. And so on the Monday morning, I handed my notice in and I started my business. Now, because my gut was telling me to do it and it was exciting, doesn't mean, of course, that it's all going to fall into place. And in fact, when I started my business, I felt really isolated. I felt alone and I felt out of my depth. And I wish I'd had my lifeboat experiences before I'd started my business because I could have applied some of those things. And the first thing that struck me when I joined the lifeboat was the support team, the team around me, the crew, the ex-crew, the support staff, everybody coming together to help and support and drive me from where I was to where I needed to be. They were teaching, they were helping, they were motivating, they were encouraging. And if you hang around with people that tell you it can't be done, tell you the challenges are too great, tell you the unknowns are too many, and even laugh at you for trying, then eventually you're going to start believing them. And I remember the first serious shout as a brand new crew member. We were called down to Worm's Head for a walker that was missing. Now, as it happens, he turned up later, he'd just gone lost, but we didn't know this at the time. And when we got down there, the seas were horrific, and it was my first serious shout. And when we arrived, the helicopter happened to arrive at the same time, and it thundered overhead, and it was just a cacophony of noise and chaos. And as we got there, the Coast Guard came over the radio. Horton Lifeboat, this is Swansea Coast Guard. Be advised that the wind is gusting a gale force 10. Repeat, gale force 10, proceed with caution. And we started to do what we call a shoreline search. And basically, the boat goes slowly along the shore. And me and Will, we were the crew, we were searching as we went, looking at the cliffs, looking at the nooks and crannies. And the helm in the back of the boat, he's looking out to sea. Because out at sea, there's these massive breaking waves, and we're between these waves and the cliffs. And every time a wave breaks, he shouts, down! And we get down in the boat, and he turns the boat into the wave, and he crashes through it. And then he comes back round, and we carry on again. And I thought to myself, blimey, my life's in his hands. First time I've ever found myself in that position. And I glanced back at him, and as I did, he caught my eye, and he gave me a nod, and he said, we've got this. And I realized at that moment the importance of having a team around you that you trust. A team around you that inspires you. So let me ask you, what does your team currently look like? Who are the people that you're mixing with on a regular basis? Do they encourage you? Do they support you? Do they drive you? Do they motivate you? Do they inspire you? Or are they holding you back? You need to surround yourself with people that inspire you. Now, having to pay a mortgage and going to sea in a gale force 10 wind, it's got a remarkable ability to motivate you to learn. The problem is you don't know what you don't know. And the fear of the unknown can be debilitating. It can be overwhelming. And one of the deals I made to myself when I joined the lifeboat, and this was actually a major mindset shift for me, was that I was going to take responsibility to learn. And I'd never done that before. I'd always sort of been waiting for people to tell me. I don't know whether it was the challenge, but I just decided I'm going to take responsibility to learn. I am going to obtain the knowledge. And I asked loads of questions, and I dug deep, and I watched people, and I just learned what I needed to know. And I think it was the famous doctor, Dr. Pepper, that says, what's the worst that can happen? And on a Sunday morning when we're training, that's a question we address. We don't potter around when we go out. When we go out, if we've got big seas, we want to know what waves we can take on and what ones we need to turn away from. If it's rough, we need to go from A to B as quickly as we can because we're going to be called upon to do that. And we run scenarios and we run practice exercises. And when we get there, we say, okay, what would we do in this situation? What if the conditions were different and more challenging? What if the kit on the boat failed? What would we do then? What would we do then? And we're asking questions all the time, and it's intense. But I think what happens is you start to address the unknown. You start to anticipate the unknown, and then the unknown just holds no fear for you. So, is there anything you haven't yet learned that you need to know? Obtain the knowledge. When I was asked to come along to the PSA, it was a bit weird because I'd done a little bit of network training, nothing more than that. And I thought, well, speaking, that's not even on my radar. Why should I go there? But I came along and I loved it and I joined. And a couple of months later, Rebecca Jones, she was the president of the region then, she sat me down and she said, Andy, what is it you want to achieve from this? Where are you going? What's your topic? What would you like to get to? And I felt a bit embarrassed because actually I didn't know. I didn't have a clue. And I said to her, Rebecca, all I can tell you is my gut is telling me this is the right place to be. I am surrounded and surrounded again by people who inspire me. I'm learning new things and I'm obtaining knowledge. And I know that in the future, I'm going to be stepping outside my comfort zone. I'm going to be stretching myself. A couple of months later, Speaker Factor came along. Rebecca explained that as a brand new member, it was absolutely compulsory that I did it. That's true. I thought it was compulsory, and I did. And I found myself standing on stage a year ago in front of you, and I can tell you for a fact that I was way outside my comfort zone. In fact, I'd left my comfort zone in Wales. I hadn't even packed it. That's how far outside it was. And I just thought, it just sort of occurred to me that the more you immerse yourself in the possibilities, the more opportunities present themselves to you. So what have you got in your future that's planned to stretch yourself again, to keep moving forward? So there I was, holding on to this boat, and my legs and my body had come out and I was kind of floating in midair. Now John hadn't managed to straighten the boat up, but remarkably, he had quickly got some power on the engine. The boat crashed through the wave and landed on the other side. My knees and my body slammed back into the deck. It took me a couple of moments to realise that I wasn't in the water. We hadn't capsized. I composed myself and we carried on edging across to the yacht. Rachel on the other side, she managed to get a line attached. She did one of those knots in the dark and we got the tow going. And I was on the boat holding onto the tow line, and every time we moved a couple of feet forward, a wave would come through and it'd smash us back. And we'd move a couple of feet forward and it would come through again and smash us back. And there were a few moments that we thought, have we even got the power to get this boat out of the surf? And I could see the guy on the deck of the yacht, and the yacht is just being absolutely hammered. And John started to zigzag the lifeboat to get some forward movement. And eventually, the yacht started moving and we pulled it out to the surf. We got to the middle of the bay and we reset the anchor and we went back to station. And the following morning, 4 hours later, it was Sunday morning, we were out on exercise. So we went back over to make sure he was okay. And he was up on deck having a cup of tea. And we pulled up alongside and we had a chat about his adventures the night before. And he said, I can't tell you how I felt when you guys came out of the dark last night. It must be amazing to make such a difference. I'm very proud of what we do on the Iron Line, but I thought to myself, wow, this is an opportunity that I could so easily have just walked away from. So if an opportunity presents itself to you, and your gut is telling you you really should do this, then take a chance. Take a chance, because you might just create your own pivotal moment.